Lower it down.
Somewhere in the Gulf of Guinea, on the high seas, there's no mercy and no quarter given. Ruthless Somali pirates challenge the world's naval powers, but who really controls these treacherous waters? To find out, we're diving into two brutal confrontations between these merciless sea criminals and Russian forces. Buckle up, because the action is about to begin. In May 2010, 11 Somali pirates mysteriously vanished after being released by the Russian Navy in the middle of the Indian Ocean. What really happened during those final hours was never officially disclosed, but evidence points to a summary execution that the Kremlin never acknowledged. The oceans have become battlefields where desperation and extreme poverty clash, with commercial interests worth billions of dollars. The waters off the Horn of Africa and the Gulf of Guinea witness daily warfare between criminals armed to the teeth and naval forces that aren't about to show any mercy. The first of these stories began on May 5, 2010. The waters of the Gulf of Aden, usually calm but filled with invisible threats, witnessed an episode that mixed courage, mystery, and tragedy. In the early hours of the day, the Russian oil tanker Moscow University was traveling with a cargo of 86,000 tons of crude oil bound for China, slowly making its way through the Indian Ocean. It was about 500 nautical miles off the coast of Somalia when everything changed. On the horizon, three dots appeared moving at high speed with disturbing determination. As minutes passed, the image became clearer. They were small vessels, the skiffs used by pirates in the region. The crew knew the danger of navigating through that zone, but the hope of not encountering pirates had made them take the risk. Now fear gripped them. They knew exactly what was about to happen. Merchant vessels have a range of options to try to repel an attack. There are powerful water cannons that can knock a person off small boats, security systems with nets to hinder boarding of the attacked ship. However, these options and their deterrent features usually aren't a real obstacle for determined criminals. Despite the tanker's attempts to evade them, launch flares, and warn of retaliation, the pirates were determined to attack. They had smelled blood, and the inevitable was approaching. An even greater threat was rapidly closing in. Finally, the swift Somali skiffs reached the imposing Russian vessel. A ladder was deployed over one of the sides. A private security aboard. This wasn't the case with the Moscow University. With no option left to escape, the captain gave the order to execute the protocol they had studied before departure, hoping they'd never have to put it into practice. The crew disabled the engines to prevent the pirates from being able to steer the ship towards some refuge on the Somali coast. If that happened, it would be much harder to get help that could penetrate enemy territory. The 23 crew members moved with calculated speed to a fortified room, impossible to open from the outside. They barricaded themselves there with water, food, and most importantly, communication equipment. Once on the ship's deck, the criminals tried to enter the room where the crew was located, but they couldn't manage it. Meanwhile, the captain contacted the company, the Coast Guard, and the Russian Navy Command. One of piracy's greatest rivals was ready for the challenge. By this date, Moscow's naval force had already faced 3 successful deployments against Somali pirates in the Horn of Africa, and was ready to respond to a new call. However, the location of the hijacked ship represented a long journey for the Russian Navy. That meant the crew would have to hold out. The criminals roamed the ship from end to end with their weapons, frustrated and fierce, thinking of ways to penetrate the room where the crew was located. They needed to take hostages to be able to negotiate a ransom. For more than 20 hours, the Moscow University was in the pirates' hands. The tension was palpable, not only aboard but also among the Russian authorities monitoring the situation from a distance. The moment of truth was approaching. But before continuing with what really happened during those final hours, subscribe and hit the bell, because what comes next had never been told with these details. On the morning of May 6th, soldiers from the Kremlin's Navy began preparing. The night before, they had received critical information about the tanker, thanks to collaboration from an Australian Forces aircraft in the area. This allowed the destroyer Marshal Shaposhnikov to reach the exact coordinates to begin its assault plan. The Marshal Shaposhnikov is a beast of war. With 163 meters in length, 6,200 tons of displacement, and an arsenal that includes 100mm cannons, Kinjal missile systems, Kashtan close-in weapon systems, and capacity for 2 Kamov Ka-27 helicopters, a colossus designed to dominate the oceans. The Marine infantry mobilized immediately. With the first light of dawn, the incursion began with sending a reconnaissance helicopter that took off from the Russian combat vessel and aimed to descend on the Moscow University. The sound of the rotor alerted the pirates, who greeted the helicopter with automatic rifle fire. But the Kremlin's men's response was swift and lethal. The aircraft returned fire with heavy machine guns, eliminating one of the attackers in an explosion of blood and metal. The tanker's captain confirmed by radio that his crew remained unharmed. That information was crucial. With the crew safe, a coordinated attack was carried out by the Russian Navy. With surgical military precision, the destroyer fired 2 warning shots before opening direct fire on the Moscow University. The 100mm projectiles hit near the pirate positions, creating geysers of water and metal that terrorized the criminals. Special operations troops took advantage of the chaos to board the ship. Fast boats approached under cover of artillery fire, while Russian Marines prepared their automatic weapons for the final assault. In a brief but intense firefight, the pirates were neutralized one by one. Surrounded and outgunned, they decided to lower their rifles and surrender before being riddled with bullets. With the attackers disarmed and their skiffs confiscated, the 23 crew members were freed without a scratch. It was all over, or so it seemed. The Russian response had been decisive, the operation surgical. But what happened next generated enormous controversy that persists to this day. Moscow's forces were supposed to take the prisoners to shore to face criminal proceedings. However, the decision they made was to abandon the pirates in an inflatable boat more than 500 nautical miles from land. As if that weren't enough, they were provided with food and water, but no navigation equipment. They never made it to Somalia. They disappeared in the vast ocean, and the Russian Ministry of Defense declared they probably died at sea. This sparked sinister speculation, like the idea that the Navy executed the criminals before leaving the bodies to drift. Although the Somali government demanded explanations, accusing the Kremlin of violating human rights, the exact details of what happened never came to light and remained shrouded in great mystery. A brutal problem had received a response of the same caliber. Although piracy had its wildest point during the 2000s, this enormous concern for maritime commerce never completely disappeared. Regions like the Gulf of Guinea and the Horn of Africa remain highly dangerous due to intense activity by criminal groups. 11 years later, on October 26, 2021, the Gulf of Guinea became the scene of another demonstration of the terror that the Russian Navy inspires among African pirates. The Gulf of Guinea, known for its turbulent waters and constant stalking by criminals, received the destroyer Vice Admiral Kulikov as the protagonist of a new operation. The Kremlin's warship went into action after receiving a distress call from the Panamanian container ship MSC Lucia. The calm of its journey had been abruptly interrupted when a fast boat appeared on the horizon with clear and hostile intentions. The Gulf of Guinea is considered a dangerous zone due to the presence of pirates, so maximum caution is advised for vessels. Ignoring the warnings, the Lucia's crew was traveling without escort or protection, making them an easy target. But luckily for them, the Vice Admiral Kulikov, a colossus of Russia's northern fleet, was patrolling those treacherous waters when it picked up the call. There was a problem. Weather conditions were adverse. A tropical storm was stirring up the sea and sky, creating an environment of torrential rain and lightning that illuminated the raging waves. Even so, the Russian response was immediate. A Ka-27 helicopter equipped with a Marine infantry team took off from the destroyer despite strong winds and reduced visibility. The aircraft cut through the air with determination, heading to the attack site so the soldiers could descend onto the besieged vessel. Seeing the Russians approaching, the pirates didn't hesitate. They fled immediately. They knew the fate of others like them and weren't willing to suffer the same fate as the pirates abandoned at sea. Everyone knows the Russian Navy doesn't forgive. The Marines descended from the helicopter while the storm raged around them. With precise movements and weapons ready, they secured the deck of the MSC Lucia and freed the crew that had taken refuge in the engine compartment. The operation had lasted less than 2 hours from the first distress call to the complete liberation of the vessel. No shots fired, no casualties, just the deterrent power of a reputation forged in blood and steel. To ensure a similar episode wouldn't be repeated, the Moscow ship escorted the Lucia until it was out of the danger zone. During the journey, the destroyer's sensors detected other suspicious vessels that immediately changed course upon identifying the threatening silhouette of the Russian warship. But wait, remember to subscribe and activate notifications so I can tell you about all the confrontations from modern wars you didn't know about. The same day, 50 nautical miles southwest of Bioko Island, the OSV Montet Tide was attacked and 3 crew members were kidnapped, demonstrating that the pirates had simply shifted their operations to avoid the Vice Admiral Kulikov. During the 4 weeks of its anti-piracy patrol, the Russian destroyer carried out multiple interceptions, provided escort to merchant vessels, and inspected suspicious boats. Its mere presence had completely altered the patterns of criminal activity in the region. The pirates had learned to recognize the characteristic silhouette of Udaloy-class destroyers on the horizon. When they appeared, criminal operations were immediately suspended. The lesson of the Moscow University had resonated throughout the entire African pirate network. On one occasion, the Vice Admiral Kulikov intercepted communications between criminal groups warning about the Russian presence and ordering the cancellation of planned attacks. Fear had changed sides. The cost of maintaining these Russian patrols was minimal compared to their effectiveness. A single destroyer had achieved what multinational coalitions hadn't accomplished in years of operations, making pirates fear for their lives instead of simply calculating commercial risks. But questions remained. How many more had disappeared in the vast ocean after encounters with Russian forces? Was this the new normal in the war against modern piracy? Was the world prepared to accept methods that guaranteed results at the cost of ethical questions? The truth is that on the high seas, where there are no witnesses or cameras, where survival depends on strength and determination, the Russian Navy had sent a message that resonated from Somalia to Guinea. Challenging the Kremlin's interests in international waters would have definitive consequences. But there's more. Classified files reveal chilling details about what really happened in those final hours aboard the Moscow University. According to leaked testimonies from Russian naval sources, the captured pirates weren't simply abandoned, they were brutally interrogated for hours on the destroyer's deck. The Russian commandos wanted information about pirate networks, base locations, communication methods, and future plans. They used interrogation techniques that violated all international conventions. One of the pirates, according to these testimonies, revealed the location of a base camp on the Somali coast before being released, along with the others. 24 hours after the Moscow University incident, Russian military drones bombed specific coordinates in Somali territory. Officially, Russia denied any military operation in the region. Unofficially, a complete pirate base was wiped off the map. Naval Dr. Alexander Rojas, who participated in the operation, developed psychological profiles of the pirates during interrogations. His recommendations to Captain Akhmarov were decisive in determining what to do with the prisoners. Rojas had studied Soviet psychological warfare methods and knew exactly how to extract information and then eliminate witnesses. When the pirates were placed in the inflatable boat, they weren't alone. They carried a tracking device that allowed the Russians to monitor their exact position. Classified navigation records show that the Marshal Shaposhnikov followed the signal for 8 hours until it stopped abruptly. What happened in those final moments? The testimonies speak of a Russian submarine that surfaced near the inflatable boat. The pirates were taken aboard again, but this time not to be interrogated. This time to disappear forever in the depths of the Indian Ocean. Lieutenant Colonel Oleg Kostanov, decorated for his role in the operation, subsequently developed an anti-piracy tactics manual that became official doctrine for the Russian Navy. The manual includes specific protocols for post-operational handling of captured criminal elements in international waters. This manual was secretly distributed to all Russian naval units deployed in anti-piracy operation. Its contents have never been publicly revealed, but naval sources confirm it includes methods to ensure that captured pirates do not represent future threats to civilian navigation. In the case of the Gulf of Guinea, the Vice Admiral Kulikov operation was just the tip of the iceberg. During the weeks prior to the rescue of the MSC Lucia, the Russian destroyer had intercepted and processed multiple pirate groups without officially reporting any contact. Satellite surveillance systems detected at least 3 pirate vessels that simply disappeared from radar after encounters with the Vice Admiral Kulikov. International naval authorities recorded these incidents as losses due to adverse weather conditions. The effectiveness of these methods has inspired other national navies. Naval intelligence sources report that China has discreetly requested copies of the Russian anti-piracy tactics manual. Even countries traditionally allied with the West have expressed private interest in adopting more decisive measures against piracy. Russian destroyers continue to sail the world's oceans, and their reputation precedes them like a shadow of steel that drives away the most audacious maritime predators. But now we know that reputation is built on secrets darker than the world imagines. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want to know what other military secrets remain hidden in the depths of the world's oceans.